All right, we good? Go, David.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to CripChat, your weekly podcast for everything disability. Today I have with me Jonathan Shar.
Hello.
Myself, David D. Co-host Cunningham.
Hello.
Mental health and disability author Chris Chaplin.
Hello.
Over to you.
Thanks so much, David, and welcome to the podcast. Welcome, Chris. How you going, Chris? Welcome to CripChat Australia.
Great to be on the show.
Fantastic. And of course, can I ask you, how's the flood?
Well, there's floods in the area, but where I am, we're just getting a lot of rain. I've had to, we've got a shared pool, like everywhere up here in the heat.
Yeah.
Had to empty it out a bit, but otherwise we're all
right. Fantastic. And so, Chris, you're set for an engaging chat with us, aren't you now, right?
I'm looking forward to it. Challenge me.
Now, of course, I must reveal a bit like a interest in this interview. Guys, Chris and I are mates for some time, so I know all about Chris. Aside from that, though, it's all good. So, Chris, tell us a bit about yourself and your lived experience of mental illness.
I started thinking how I would describe myself, and in fact, I think the ridiculous number of different things I would label myself with, in part, is a reflection of some of the mental health challenges I've had. So I'm a husband and father. I think that defines me more than anything else. I'm an activist, have been for all my adult life. I currently work as a consultant on things like governance, mainly for the non-profit sector, governance, risk management, corporate writing. I do lots of writing for organisations if they need board reports or policies, reports to government. I'm also an aspiring creative writer working on my first novel. I've got a background as a teacher. I trained to be an English and psychology teacher. And I've got a background in homelessness and housing services, 25 years in that, and 25 years in the political spectrum, working. I've stood as a political candidate. I've been the National Secretary of the Greens for 2 years. So I've got quite a bit of background there. I've backpacked through Latin America for 2 years. We got taken off a bus at the point of a machine gun. I've got all sorts of interesting life experiences. And
amazing.
My health, my mental health, or my mental health conditions have woven in and out of that all my life.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's only just in the last 5 years or so that I've become aware of what some of those conditions are and how they've formed me and formed my life experience. That's been quite a journey.
And so I guess then, there'd be levels that they'd be impacting upon, right? I mean, you would have to work out ways of how to manage them, wouldn't you? I mean, there'd be challenges with that.
Part of it is part of the challenge is, first of all, knowing that you're different. I didn't realise that I was different for a long time. Well, I knew I was different. I didn't understand why. And like many people who have mental health conditions of some sort, I just thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't just I was lazy or I was dysfunctional without knowing that there was a cause for it. There was something I could, at the very least, put a label on, if not learn how to manage. And, for example...
It's David D here.
Yep.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off. I think the accepting your disability at first is the first thing that we need to do.
And there are some people for whom their disability is totally obvious. There are some people where it might not be apparent to others, but it's certainly apparent to the person who has it. And then there are people like me who may not have even understood that I had a disability. And so mental health is more or less invisible. You can see someone who, for example, is psychotic. You may be able to tell they're psychotic, but you may not be able to tell that someone's depressed. And often those with mental health issues have become expert at concealing what's wrong with them or that they're different. So, and for example, is neurodiversity a disability? Or is it just difference? Is having, for example, having a limb difference, is that a disability or is it just a difference? Some people may find it prevents them from accessing everything. But I think there are such loaded terms in the disability field, and I think it's more valuable to talk about difference and enabling people to participate with their difference.
Understood.
So, for example, I haven't got a diagnosis yet. Just navigating the health system is difficult enough, but it's clear in my mind because there's a family history that I found out about 5 years ago of ADHD. And I initially thought, no, that's nonsense. But the more I thought about it, the more I realised it explained all my childhood problems, all my problems at university, all my problems at work. Not all of them, but it explains so much. And yet I think of it also as my superpower. So I get easily distracted. I get easily distracted because I have a heightened awareness of everything around me. I see stuff that no one else sees. I'll be on a path and I'll see an interesting, I'll see, for example, an interesting mushroom. And I'll point it out and people go, how did you even see that? Well, because I see everything. That's my problem. I get distracted.
Yeah.
My family knows I'm the one that will always be, if we're on a bushwalk, I was the teenager that was always at the end because I was looking at everything. I hear sounds. I see what's wrong with kids before their parents see them, like in terms of something upsetting them.
You've got the gift of the gab, just to observe others and look at things in different ways.
So that is both a superpower and also it means that I can't get jobs done because I get distracted and forget to go back to the core job I was working on. And that's been a problem all my life.
Mm.
And if anyone wants to ask any questions or anything like that, please do in the comments.
Yeah, so Chris, I mean, I guess your family would have had a reaction to you too, and how they actually cope with it too, right? I mean,
they just thought, well, interestingly, it's because there was so little understanding of, for example, ADHD when I was a child. I don't think it even, no teachers or families talked about it. And so I was just, there was a TV show back in the 60s called Dennis the Menace, and that totally...
I remember that show.
Yeah. a good kid who just ended up causing mayhem. Well, I was perhaps not even so much a good kid. I was troublesome, deeply troublesome.
Yeah.
And some of that then leads to whether I was prone to depression or not. I ended up with childhood depression, teenage depression, young adult depression, which ended up becoming overwhelming. And no one talked about depression. All of my friends should have realised that I was deeply and dangerously depressed. But back in the 80s, no one wanted to talk about that stuff. No one said, "Are you okay?" I would have said, "No, I'm not." Or maybe I would have said, "Yeah, of course I'm all right," because no one wanted to talk about the fact that they were at the end of their tether. But things have changed and there's a lot more acceptance, not fully, but more acceptance. But this is the first time I've ever talked about
Chris,
these issues to anyone other than my wife.
Wow.
Chris, did you find it hard to find friends when you were younger because of this?
It's weird. I was a very shy kid, really shy, and yet I loved to get involved in things. And so I ended up with an unusually large friend network, even though I was shy. But we'd go to parties, and would I go out and chat to new people? No, I'd stay with my friends because I was shy.
Yeah.
But then I discovered, well, once I was old enough, I discovered alcohol and the liberating effect of alcohol. And once I was tanked enough, I could go and talk to anyone.
I understand.
So a few good boozy nights then, Chris.
Well, that led to alcoholism, and that was not good. And alcohol is a depressant, so if you're already feeling depressed, alcohol's a very dangerous thing to be taking. And it spirals because you start thinking about negative things while you're drunk, and you think what a loser you are. And then you wake up and you remember thinking what a loser you are, and because you don't want to think about that, you have another drink. It's a very dangerous cycle.
Mm.
So
And I'm not a loser.
it's like it's on a fuel on a fire.
Yeah. I mean, Chris, I mean, would there be a set challenge that would remake and or one of the difficult things you'd have to deal with your mental illness, with going through life at all, or not? I mean, is there one thing that would be a major challenge for you?
I think one of the things that's become apparent to me is that I probably have a thing called obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So that's different from OCD, which is an anxiety state. You get worried about all sorts of things. You obsess about things.
What things do you obsess about? Like what people think about you?
No. See, I don't have that condition. I have a different one called obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And that's more about staying in control. So, for example, it means one of the symptoms of that, which I definitely have, is perfectionism. And that has tormented me because I can't bear to have something that's not correct, that's not right, that's not 100%. And I get it to 99%, but then I have to still fluff around getting it right. And there's an expression, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. I'm slowly learning that. This is a very hard process for me.
I can understand where you're coming from because I'm sort of a perfectionist myself, but now I can't see. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mind. I don't mind how it is.
So I live by this is my wife's thing that she's taught me. I try to live by the 80-20 rule. Once it's 80% good, that's good enough. And because I'm pretty good at what I do,
it's good enough.
My 80% is probably 90% for other people doing the same kind of thing. So let it go. That'll do. Move on.
Let it be. Doesn't have to be 100%.
And that's been a real issue in my workplace. But thankfully, I've had good, not always, but some good managers who've said, they know that I've got really high capabilities, and they've said, Chris, just stop running behind schedule by making it perfect. Just get it in. So it's a learning process for me. It's about literally my condition.
Have you ever tried, instead of trying to make it perfect, once it's finished and good enough, you reckon, without trying to make it perfect, give it to someone else, have a look at it, and then get them to read it, and if they find any mistakes, then they'll tell you.
Yeah. On the other hand, I'm really good at what I do, so if I give it to anyone else, they're probably not going to find the errors I would have found in it.
They'll want to find
it's that control bit, right, Chris?
It is, but I am, I'm an expert in a range of things.
Yeah.
So I struggle with people who are not, who do the stuff I do, but not as well as I do. I don't have problems with people who don't profess to be expert, but it's the ones who say they're expert and then are below par. But that's I try not to be too judgmental. And my a lot of my life I've worked in welfare services where I'm dealing with people who don't have the advantages I've had, and so that moderates your approach to life. You realise how lucky you can be, even if you've got mental health disabilities, other conditions. You realise, wow, there's others who are doing it much tougher than I am.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Chris, there'd be like times when you're alone at night, when you're in like a dark space, right? I mean, are there ways how do you actually manage to cope through those times? Because often mental individuals do face those despairing moments where they're actually alone and they've got to cope on their own. I mean, what's your strategy for that?
The strategy I've learned from very hard, bitter experience is the first step is to recognise that you're caught in that whirlpool. I think of it as a whirlpool. Most other people just float on the surface, but when the whirlpool of depression gets at you, you end up losing sight of the horizon and you just look internally at all the things and you end up in a dialogue with yourself about negativity. And it's a spiral and you just keep looking at all the negatives internally and you lose sight. And the deeper you get, the more you can become irrational about that. And the trick is to break out of that whirlpool somehow. And in fact, what I've learned is learning the very early signs of being sucked into that and saying especially to the people who care for me, look, I think I'm at risk of cycling down into depression. I'm going to take a back seat for a while. I'm going to not do the stuff that was disappointing me and leading to further negative thoughts. And I need to break this cycle. That, the other thing I'd say is don't do what I did for nearly all of my life, which was, because I'm a perfectionist, refuse to accept anyone else's help. Instead, say, damn, there are people who are professionals at helping me with this kind of stuff. Go and see them. Go and see your doctor. Talk to someone.
Yeah.
Chris, have you ever?
Go.
Chris, have you ever just read looked at a magazine and sat there and say, this guy's doing this wrong? Nah, that guy done that wrong. Just judge other people's work?
Oh, I judge people's professional work. I really try and avoid judging people as human beings. I do, of course. I mean, there are people
Yeah,
who
but
are just assholes.
I'm talking about authors. I'm talking about authors.
Yeah.
You could have did that better.
I'm critical of authors. Literary criticism is incredibly important.
Yeah, see, I studied IT and I was going to become a programmer, and I do look at other programs and look at it, and sometimes say, yeah, that could be done differently and better.
I can't look
according to
part of
the way I think about it.
Part of my skill is you show me a sheet of paper, just a one page, and I'll read through it, and I will, without even looking carefully, I'll be able to find every spot where there's two spaces instead of just one. So like I see that immediately, it leaps out of me. I'll see every apostrophe that is in the wrong place. I'll see all the poor grammar. I'm an editor. I see all that stuff. And there's no point getting frustrated with it because I get paid to fix that stuff. The challenge is when I write my own stuff, it has to be perfect and devoid of all those errors. Whereas the number one rule as a creative writer, is just write the stuff, write it, fix it up later, get someone else to fix it.
Get someone else to fix it, exactly.
So, Chris, I mean, if you had a chance to actually tell government some views of what your thoughts would be, what would you actually say to governments around Australia about how they deal with people with mental illness, around how we support them? What measures would you put in place if you had the chance to contribute to mental health policy in Australia?
I think the solution is a really simple one, but I'm as you know, a socialist, an anarchist, a leftist, progressive. My view is make sure you have sufficient government revenue to vastly increase funding and the services. So increase mental health services, increase primary access to primary health care for mental illness, increase the funding for the things that lead to people being so stressed and feeling excluded, such as build more public housing for a start, and community housing. Improve welfare programs that help to enable people, and instead of saying, well, we don't want to do that because rich people deserve to pay less tax. No, tax the rich and fund ordinary folk.
Mm-hmm.
The rich can already afford to get the mental health services they need, but I'm doing all right. I'm on the lower half of middle income, but I do all right. But even I struggle with access to healthcare, and in rural Australia, it's 10 times worse.
Yeah.
So increase for a start.
Yeah. David, you got any questions on this question about government policy?
Well, do you think? Well, obviously, sorry, I got cut off a bit earlier. Well, what's your idea on government policies which would better people with mental health?
I reckon one of the things that government can do, and it can lead the way in changing the words that we use. So instead of using a medical model to say illness, there are some people who are ill because of their mental state, but there's a vast number of us who have a condition. That's all it is, a condition, but it doesn't mean we're ill. So if you've got asthma as a condition and you carry a puffer in your purse and you use it maybe once or twice a year when there's a lot of pollen around, well, you wouldn't call that asthma isn't an illness. It's a condition. So if we start talking about conditions, and I think if we get away from the idea that you're well or you're ill or you're well, and instead think of health as a spectrum. So we're all on that spectrum, every one of us. And what that means is every one of us has the propensity for depression. And some of us may go our entire lives and just have, maybe a couple of hours of depression once a year. And others struggle to have a single hour of not being depressed in a whole year. And so we're all on a spectrum on that. We're all on a spectrum of all sorts of things. We talk about the autism spectrum, but we also talk about autism itself being part of a broader spectrum of neurodiversity. I just think we need to get away from this binary concept that we're man or woman, or we're straight, or we're this or that. Let's get away from black and white thinking and say we're all on all of these things are spectrums where it's okay to be somewhere. It's okay to be at one end or the other, but it's also okay to be in the middle, or to be changing what your view might be, or to be getting assistance to manage the place that you feel that you're at or that you've ended up being in that spectrum.
Jonathan, you had a question or a comment?
So getting away from binaries of sane or insane, seeing it as a broader spectrum.
I struggled to understand you. I'm sorry, Jonathan. Were you asking about how that is about the broader issue?
Chris is basically asking about seeing it as more of a binary spectrum around, as you were saying, around. Are you just agreeing with the fact that it's a broad, concept?
And that's where I think government can lead the way in talking in those broader terms in a way that they give legitimacy to a different way to think about it and to start conversations in the same way as they're doing that with things like the Indigenous voice, whether you agree with it or not, but they're starting a conversation about that. There's all those things that government really has a role in, not setting public policy, but creating the space for policy debate and discussion about where do we fit? What does it mean to have a mental illness? Or should we talk about it in terms of everyone having health needs, some of which are mental health needs, some of which need support at different times, and some need intense support? Well, that means everyone is on that spectrum.
Yeah, I agree.
Chris, do you think people with mental health that don't like to be called a disability?
I think it goes in both directions. I think it can be challenging to say that my mental, I'll speak about myself, it can be challenging for me to recognise that I have disabilities that impact on my capacity to live a fulfilling life. And at the same time, I think there is discrimination against me when I say it, I have a disability, because it's not something you can see, and it's not something that necessarily I have obvious supports for. And I think to a degree, there's some discrimination between those with physical disabilities that are visible and those with disabilities such as limited vision or impaired hearing that you can disguise. And I think there is further discrimination against those who have mental health conditions that are disabling or can be disabling. And so I think there are different communities who want to protect their space within that broad disability spectrum. And they want to protect their space and say, yeah, hang on, you're a newcomer, you don't belong in this group. And I just think, well, let's all accept the spectrum that we're all on.
So Chris, I mean, how has your local community actually reacted and responded? I mean, how does the local community and your close friends group respond to you and your positive outlook on the life that you lead? I mean, would you be received well up there in Queensland, or is there challenges you face, or what's the response to you?
Look, up here in far north Queensland, this is God's own territory. It's cowboy country. I love it. People don't have a lot of tolerance for difference up here, and that can be challenging. So, their attitude, if you're having a problem, is toughen up, princess. That's a common expression. Suck it up, princess.
Suck it up, princess.
Which is, or get over yourself, which is not a lot of help if you're struggling. On the other hand, I've come from inner Melbourne, where I lived for the last couple of years, in Northcote, which is the home of people who wear metaphoric badges. Oh, I'm this and I'm that, and we have to be delicate and sensitive about just about everything you can think of. And they wouldn't last a second up here, but then the cowboys up here wouldn't last a second in Northcote. So, which community do I belong in? I don't. I belong in the community of my friends, and then within my community of friends, there's a smaller, intimate group that I share some of my issues with. But I'll be honest with you, there's very few people. David, you're one. Jenny, my wife, is another. And a couple of my very closest friends who know some of my mental health challenges. And all the rest haven't. My family has no idea.
Wow.
Because there's such stigma still attached to it. And it's very hard to start the conversation to say, oh, did you know that when I was 21, I tried to kill myself? And it's like, what? No. Well, I'm a survivor. I'm glad I failed. I'm very glad.
Oh, so am I. Wouldn't have asked the friends I had with you, because if it wasn't, you had done that. Exactly. David, you had a question?
No.
You don't? Okay.
Well, I forgot what I was going to ask.
That's okay. These things happen. So, Chris, I mean, have you ever tried to approach that topic of your family to, approach your conditions with them at all, or not? I mean, has there been any time that they've been hinted at being brought up, or have you just chosen not to go there?
I've really struggled to reveal the extent of the battle I've had with depression, but my family's a little bit more open to talking about ADHD because there's other family members, especially younger ones, that I want to be careful not to say too much. But there is a family issue with ADHD, and so the modern way of looking at it is to say, oh yeah, let's be open and talk about it, and so the challenge for me is to say, that includes me. And
Yeah.
I have to say, when one of my close siblings told me about their diagnosis, I was very dismissive. I said, I grew up with you. I never saw this.
Yeah.
And then I realised when they provided me with further information and a few things to read, I thought, oh, bloody hell, not only do I see that might have been what you had, that's what I had. Bloody hell, that's what I
Yeah.
have.
Which would be well interesting to face, right? It'd be a moment for you to really actually have some reflection on, right? Give voice for some thought. Yeah.
This is why it's so important to talk about it, and that's why I was happy to make your show the one where I come out about my conditions, my disability, whatever you like.
We are highly honoured, Chris. We really are. I do appreciate you go us there. So Chris, just as a final question for you, if we go to final thoughts for the episode tonight, would there be one specific triumph and achievement that you've actually want to point to in your life that you've really celebrated a lot, and also with having your condition, and also would you have any advice for people with similar conditions or how to actually overcome the challenges they face?
I think the greatest achievement for me is that I've found a way to live happily and live with my conditions. And through trial and error and some limited professional help, I've especially learnt the tricks to managing it somewhat. I still need a way to go. I still need a bit of help. And so my greatest achievement is to actually have the most beautiful family, beautiful son, beautiful wife. I'm really happy where I live. I'm very lucky. And my advice to people who have, whether it's ADHD or any other personality disorder or condition or mental health condition, is don't battle it alone. I know what that's like. It doesn't get you very far, and often it sets you back. Go and talk to at least your GP or someone close to you, and say, what do I do? How do I get better at managing this, or who do I see to get help?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chris, for that. And before I want to ask David, you got any final questions you want to ask, David?
Chris, have you ever? Do you look at things differently now that you feel now that you know you've got a history of mental health in the family?
I do, and I look at the world differently. So I'm partly aware of what my emotional state is. I check in with myself in a way to say, how am I going? I'm a little bit more aware of when others might look like they're struggling, and so I check in with them rather than not caring.
Understood.
I take more pleasure out of life. I am actually the good thing is, because I don't want to spiral down into depression, I look for things that make me realise how happy I am and how lucky I am, and how much I value being alive and take joy in being alive. That's what I do.
Absolutely. Okay. So, final thoughts.
So it brings you back up.
Yeah, final thoughts, David.
Final thoughts. Final thoughts. My final thoughts are: if you are thinking differently, always come back and and ask yourself, why am I thinking this way?
Precisely.
Don't do anything. Don't do anything that will hurt your family members.
Yeah.
And allow them to think different of you.
So important.
You wanna live a happy life, and if you're thinking negatively, let somebody know, and if they can help you and show you the right direction, ask a doctor or someone.
Yeah.
Talk to somebody. Do not never injure yourself or do anything. There's a helpline. If you don't want to talk to someone that you know,
Correct.
there's always Lifeline
Very important,
where
David.
you can
Right.
where you can talk to someone.
Yeah.
Even though you know, if you don't want someone that you know to know, but someone that's on the that you can talk to, a stranger, but has compassion.
Yeah. Okay, Chris, your final thought as our guest contributor for today's episode?
David, that was such a good contribution, and there's others, of course. There's the Black Dog, I think it's the Black Dog Foundation, that do great work on depression. There's a whole lot of organisations that you can turn to, but you're so right. The last thing anyone wants to see is someone close to you who ends up making a bad decision because they didn't reach out.
Yeah, correct. And Jonathan, your final thought?
Well, it's important that we recognize mental illness as a disability, and even though its effects are not always externally obvious, we can reach out to those who are close to us.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But never forget to ask if someone's okay.
absolutely. And look, my final thought is that I've really appreciated this episode. Chris, it's been great having you. It's been fantastic to actually have you share your experiences. I know that our audience really will appreciate it. And look, I want to actually extend a huge thank you on behalf of the production team and the board of our parent company. You joining us today. Thanks for coming, Chris. You've been terrific to have on the episode.
Thanks, Chris.
And look, guys, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast. That was CripChat Australia this week. Join us next week for another episode of CripChat Australia. Thanks so much for your weekly podcast on disability.
You've been watching CripChat, your weekly podcast.